Today, Mr Speaker, I will outline a plan to renew Queensland's finances and grow our future investment, which will reshape the Queensland economy and propel us to the next phase of our development. Like all bold measures, this plan will invite intense debate and even opposition. But it is consistent with both the immediate imperatives of our state's budget stability and the need to secure our long-term future and prosperity.
Order.
Are you ready?
Order. The Honourable Premier.
Mr Speaker, the fact is that the global recession has confronted us. It has confronted us as individuals, as citizens, as employers and as employees. The crushing tragedy of unemployment is known today to more than 114,000 Queenslanders. As each month goes by, the reality of global recession visits more households across the state. The global recession has also confronted us as a state and as a government as the stewards of our economy and our public finances. Confronted with the total loss of $14 billion in expected revenue over the next 4 years, a third of our annual budget robbed from Queensland by the global recession, confronted with a further $2 billion decline in our GST receipts since the federal budget was brought down, enough to fund our entire police service for a year, confronted with the need in these tough financial times to continue the infrastructure task to build for a growing population.
Order. Order. The Honourable Premier.
Confronted with these challenges, Mr Speaker, we held our nerve and, along with most governments in the world, we chose to stimulate our economy in the short term. Mr Speaker, we made what was in many ways a simple choice: to, above all else, keep our record-building program going, to protect the 119,000 jobs that it supports, and to continue building Queensland's future. And we have always said that it required tough decisions in the future, tough decisions to restore the state's finances, to enable, not disable, future growth, to come through the global recession stronger and not weaker. The measures I announced today are consistent with this approach. And, Mr Speaker, the time has come to reassess and realign our public asset base with the needs of Queensland this century. Government has resolved to undertake a package of strategic asset sales designed to secure the future of a number of commercial assets without the ongoing need for public investment.
Order.
This frees the government's balance sheet to better support the development of public infrastructure like schools, hospitals, public transport, public housing and roads. Our Renewing Queensland plan will restructure our asset portfolio with the sale of Queensland Motorways Limited, the Port of Brisbane Corporation, Forest Plantations Queensland, Queensland Rail's above and below rail coal business and the Abbott Point Coal Terminal. Options for the sale of QR's bulk freight, intermodal, retail and regional freight services will also be investigated and offered to market in the most appropriate and feasible way. Further, we will commence negotiations with the Commonwealth for the sale or lease of QR's regional below-track network to the Commonwealth Government-owned Australian Rail Track Corporation. However, we will retain full public ownership of Queensland Rail's passenger network. Mr Speaker, the asset sales announced will be progressed over the next 3 to 5 years. This timeframe recognises not only the complexity of the process and the need to prepare detailed plans on the sales structure, but also the need to time transactions with capacity in the market. This staged program of asset sales will deliver proceeds of an estimated $15 billion and, just as importantly, it will avoid a further $12 billion in required capital investment in those businesses over the next 5 years. This represents a total benefit to taxpayers of almost $30 billion. The government will forego annual estimated returns of approximately $280 million a year as a result of the sale program. However, the $12 billion in avoided capital alone will save Queenslanders around $750 million every year in interest. In total, these measures have the potential to reduce state debt by $15 billion by 2013-14. Mr. Speaker, we currently spend in Queensland more than $500 million a year in a fuel subsidy program. But Queensland taxpayers and the motoring public are not getting value for money. The recent independent Pincus inquiry identified that Queenslanders are not receiving the full benefit of what taxpayers are spending on the scheme. We also know that New South Wales motorists are crossing the border to take advantage of the subsidy. And the proposal by the New South Wales government to abolish their tiered fuel subsidy scheme from July 1 will only make it more attractive for New South Wales motorists to cross the border and fill up their tanks. Queensland taxpayers should not have to subsidise interstate motorists. It does not represent value for taxpayers' money. So, Mr. Speaker, as part of this year's budget, the government has taken the decision to end our fuel subsidy program as of the 1st of July this year. This will bring us into line with every state in the country. Mr. Speaker, I do not want to diminish in any way the burden that this will place on motorists. But it will also save taxpayers more than $2.4 billion over 4 years and is part of our strong plan to regain our AAA credit rating and restore the budget surplus, without jeopardising vital infrastructure like hospitals, schools and roads. It is a sacrifice that we are asking of Queenslanders to play their part in keeping the building program going and protecting the 119,000 jobs it supports. The fact is that at the moment and for the next several years, Queensland would need to borrow the funds necessary to keep the fuel subsidy program going. And in times of difficult choices, that is simply a luxury that Queensland cannot afford. Paying off our debt faster is like paying off a home faster. This measure alone means we will save almost $300 million in interest payments over the next 4 years. And the money saved will go into the things that are most important: running our hospitals, running our schools, our police and other vital services. Mr. Speaker, our Renewing Queensland plan and the abolition of the fuel subsidy are measures undertaken with two goals in mind. Firstly, keeping our building program going to support jobs now to soften the blow of the global recession. And secondly, dealing with the long-term reforms that will restore the budget to surplus over time and realign our finances for the challenges of the future. This is what responsible governments across the world are doing, because the alternatives are too awful to contemplate. Letting our building program collapse would destroy jobs and see us lag many years behind the infrastructure demands of a growing state. This is something I am not going to let happen, Mr. Speaker. But it is not just necessary for the times that not just the necessity of the times that drives these announcements. Crises often provide the impetus for fundamental rethinks. This global financial crisis has caused us to examine our asset base in light of current challenges and modern priorities. As has occurred often in our 150-year history, the circumstances we find ourselves in give us cause to rethink the role of government, to ensure our priorities and our agenda in this century align with the challenges we face in this century. Because the challenges of this century demand that we subsidise public transport, not the freight transport requirements of coal companies. It demands that we invest in schools, not in forestry plantations. It demands that we build and run hospitals, not coal ports. Mr. Speaker, the announcements made today are made in the interests of Queenslanders and in the interests of its working families. Mr. Speaker, my responsibility as Premier, like the responsibility of every leader, is to develop new strategies when the circumstances around you change, and to find ways to turn problems into opportunities. With these decisions, we strategically reposition Queensland for the future, and we profoundly shift the financial structure of our budget from the challenges of the past to the opportunities and demands of the future. And most importantly, we give ourselves and our state the best chance of coming through the furnace of the global financial crisis stronger, not weaker.